Hi, budgeters. How many of you have heard that a recession is coming? How many of you are feeling the weight of inflation? How many of us are just living plain check to check and everything is just tight? So, if things are tight for you on an everyday basis, what is going to happen if an emergency comes for you?
Don't you wanna be free?
What happens? What's going to happen? Do you have enough in your savings to cover you? Do you have an emergency fund? That is my question for you today. Do you have an emergency fund? Okay, so if not, what do you do about that? Some people tell me they don't even know what an emergency fund is, and that's fine because I'm going to tell you right now. An emergency fund is emergency savings that you put aside. You're not using that money on a day to day. That's savings that you put aside in case of an emergency. A shopping spree is not an emergency. You wanting a little bit of extra something is not an emergency. Your car breaking down on the side of a road, now that's an emergency. Your refrigerator going, that's an emergency. Your washer or dryer going, that is an emergency. And that's when you will go into that rainy day fund or that emergency fund and pull out money in order to cover those expenses. You will not need to use debt for that. You will not need to put it on a credit card. You will not need to borrow money because you have that money set aside. So, how do you know how much money you'll need to have set aside? Now, right now on the screen, I'm showing you my expenses for the month. Now, there's some things that I tweaked in there that I don't usually add, like gas and food and miscellaneous, but I wanted to make it all encompassing so that you know about how much I approximately spend a month, right? So, if those are my monthly expenses, I need to have 6 months worth of those expenses inside of an emergency fund. Because if something happens where I lose my job, right? That's an emergency. And I am not receiving income, I can go into that fund to support me for 6 months until I am able to um, support myself again through an outside income. All right. So that those expenses times 6 months, that's what you need. So if you don't know what your expenses are, that's where you start. You start with a budget. You start by knowing how much you spend each and every month. And then you times that by 6. And then that is the amount that you shoot for. That is the amount that you aim for in your emergency fund. So how do you get there, right? So you know what your expenses are now. You know what they are times 6. How do you get there? A bunch of different ways you could possibly get there. First and foremost, you could work it into your budget, right? So right now I have a savings plan posted on the screen. You see that each month there are certain amounts of money that goes into specific buckets. One of them being an emergency fund. That way I'm building up my emergency fund until I get to that point where I have reached that amount that I stated was what I needed for my 6 month emergency fund. Okay, that's one way. You can continue to save with your checks, continue to save with the income that you have going in until you reach that amount. Or let's say you're really nervous. People keep saying a recession is coming. Gas is through the roof. Food is through the roof. Clothing is through the roof, right? So what are you going to do now? You need to maybe sell some things. Go around your home, declutter, get rid of those toys, get rid of that junk. Put it on let go. Put it on Facebook Marketplace, somewhere. Get the cash for those items that you're going to sell and then put them into your emergency fund. So sell things real fast. What else can you do? You can get a hustle. Hustle something. Sell your banana pudding. Sell your fried chicken. Get you some platters together. Do whatever you can in order to build up that amount. People all the time want to ask me about investing. You want to ask me about investing, but you don't have an emergency fund. Get your emergency fund straight, and then the investing comes later. Right? But what are you going to do in case of an emergency? If you've taken that money and you've invested it, you're not going to be able to pull it out so fast. Or if the market drops, then you're going to be pulling it out and you're going to be leaving money on the table. So it is important to have a 6-month emergency fund. We just went through what an emergency fund is, how you can get it real fast, right? If you have any questions, you can always DM me, but it is important for you to have an emergency fund, and I cannot stress that enough. It keeps you out of debt. It keeps you from begging, borrowing, and pleading. And it's a safety net. Who don't want to be safe? Who don't want to have a net? Who don't want to have some support in case something happens? You lose your job, right? Come on. Budgeters, you got this. You got this. Get yourself an emergency fund.